The morning Celeste Hargrove's mother-in-law threw her portfolio across the kitchen and told her to stop pretending you belong here. Celeste didn't say a word. She picked up the scattered pages, quarterly projections, site evaluations, signed acquisition letters, folded them back into the leather binder, and walked out of the room. Not because she was weak, because she already knew something none of them did. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Celeste Hargrove, 36 years old, had been married to Marcus Hargrove for 4 years when things started to unravel. To everyone in the Hargrove family, Celeste was the quiet one, the one who didn't come from money, the one Marcus had inexplicably chosen over the kind of woman his parents had spent years selecting for him. Women with the right names, the right schools, the right dinner table conversation. Celeste had none of that. She'd grown up in Greensboro, North Carolina, the daughter of a woman who cleaned office buildings on the night shift and a father who left before Celeste started kindergarten. She'd put herself through college on loans and part-time work, graduated with a degree in healthcare administration, and then spent the next decade doing something the Hargroves never knew about because she never told them. Never told Marcus either, not fully. He knew she worked in healthcare. He knew she traveled for work. He knew she had meetings she didn't always explain. He never asked enough questions to learn the rest. Marcus Hargrove, 39, was the only son of Reginald Hargrove, 68, founder and chairman emeritus of Hargrove Medical Group, a regional hospital network with 7 facilities across the southeast. Reginald had built it from a single urgent care clinic in Savannah and spent 40 years turning it into something his family could inherit. Marcus was supposed to run it someday. He had the title already, Chief Operating Officer, though most of the real decisions still went through Reginald. Marcus looked good in the role. He had the handshake, the suit, the name on the letterhead. What he didn't have, though nobody said it out loud, was the instinct his father had. Marcus's mother, Vivian Hargrove, 65, had opinions about everything. The house they lived in, the neighborhood, the car Celeste drove, the way Celeste dressed at family dinners, the fact that Celeste didn't volunteer at the Hospital Foundation gala the way previous girlfriends had. Vivian had a favorite phrase for things she found beneath the family standard: "That's not how we do things." She said it to Celeste at least once every visit, usually more. Celeste had learned to smile and say nothing. The woman Vivian did approve of was Diane Whitmore. Diane, 37, was the daughter of a Georgia state senator, had attended Spelman, and had dated Marcus for 2 years before Celeste came along. When Marcus ended things with Diane to marry Celeste, Vivian never fully accepted it, and somehow, over the years, Diane had never fully disappeared. She'd stayed close to Vivian, to the family circles, to Marcus in ways Celeste noticed but couldn't always name. By the 3rd year of the marriage, Celeste knew something had shifted. Marcus came home later. His phone went face down on the counter. When she reached for his hand in the car, his response was a beat too slow, like he was somewhere else. She didn't confront him. She wasn't sure she wanted the answer yet. She kept going to work. She kept traveling. She kept doing what she'd been doing for years, quietly and without asking anyone's permission. The breaking point came on a Saturday in March. Celeste had returned from a 3-day trip to Nashville, a site visit she couldn't reschedule. She walked into their house in Atlanta and knew immediately that the air had changed, the smell of it, the quality of the quiet. She walked upstairs and found an earring on the nightstand that wasn't hers. Small, gold, a style she recognized because she'd seen Diane Whitmore wearing it at the Hargrove Christmas dinner 2 months ago. She set her bag down. She sat on the edge of the bed. She looked at the earring for a long time. Then she picked it up, put it in her coat pocket, and went downstairs to start dinner. When Marcus came home that night, she didn't mention it. She watched him instead, watched the way he moved through the kitchen, the way his eyes avoided the bedroom door, the way he laughed a little too easily at something on his phone. She'd always been good at watching. It was one of the things that had made her so effective at work, though Marcus didn't know the specifics of what that work required. She asked him quietly over dinner, "Is there something you want to tell me?" He said, "No." She nodded and cleared the plates. The following week, Vivian called Celeste to the family home under the pretense of discussing the upcoming Easter gathering. Celeste drove out to the house in Buckhead, the big one with the circular driveway, and the garden Vivian paid a crew to maintain year-round. She was let in by the housekeeper and found Vivian waiting in the sitting room with her hands folded and her expression already decided. Reginald wasn't there. That was the first sign. Vivian told Celeste, with the specific gentleness of someone who has practiced being cruel in a refined way, that she thought it would be best for everyone if Celeste considered stepping back from the marriage, that Marcus deserved someone who fit the life the family had built, that Celeste had never really fit, and they all knew it, and wasn't it better to be honest? She used the word graceful several times, as in, The graceful thing would be to let him go. Celeste asked if Marcus knew about this conversation. Vivian said Marcus agreed it was time. Celeste drove home. She didn't cry in the car. She thought about something she'd read once, a long time ago, about the difference between a setback and a position. A setback could break you. A position was just information about where you stood. She now knew exactly where she stood. She called her attorney that evening. Not a divorce attorney. She wasn't ready to decide that yet. But the attorney who handled her corporate affairs, a woman named Patricia Osei, who had been with her for 6 years and who understood, better than almost anyone, the full picture of what Celeste had built. What the Hargroves didn't know, what Marcus didn't know, not really, was that the quiet woman who sat at their dinner table and nodded politely through Vivian's comments about centerpieces and hem lengths had, over the past 9 years, built one of the fastest-growing healthcare real estate development companies in the country. Celeste hadn't founded a hospital. She'd done something the medical world sometimes overlooked. She'd built the buildings they operated in. ClearPath Health Properties. 17 facilities in 11 states, 3 more under construction. Celeste owned 71% of the company. The rest belonged to 2 early investors who had known her since her first acquisition. A single medical office building in Durham that she'd purchased at 27 with every dollar she had and every loan she could justify. ClearPath was not a household name. That was by design. Celeste had never sought attention. She ran the company through people she trusted, traveled under her maiden name when she wanted anonymity, and kept her public profile minimal. She had been approached twice by financial press wanting to profile her. She'd declined both times. The Hargrove family had built a hospital network. Celeste had built the kind of company that bought hospital networks real estate. In fact, and this was the detail that would matter soon, ClearPath Health Properties had been in quiet negotiations for the past 8 months to acquire the real estate assets underlying 3 of the Hargrove Medical Group's 7 facilities. The deal was structured as a sale-leaseback. Hargrove Medical Group would sell the properties to ClearPath, receive a capital infusion to address some long-standing debt obligations Reginald had accumulated during an expansion in 2021 and then leased the buildings back at favorable rates. It was a good deal for Hargrove. Patricia had structured it carefully. Neither side's attorneys had flagged anything unusual. The Hargrove board didn't know that the principal of ClearPath was Marcus's wife. Celeste had not concealed it fraudulently. There was no legal requirement to disclose a spousal relationship in this context, and she and Marcus had always maintained entirely separate financial lives, which was unusual but not uncommon among couples where one partner had significant assets predating the marriage. What had happened was simply that no one had asked. Reginald's team had run due diligence on ClearPath as a company. They hadn't run personal background on every individual in the ownership structure. Celeste's name appeared on the documents. It just hadn't connected for anyone. That was about to change. The Hargrove board meeting to approve the ClearPath acquisition was scheduled for the 2nd Tuesday of April. Reginald had been pushing for a fast close. The debt was creating pressure, and the capital from the sale-leaseback would give the medical group room to breathe. Marcus, as COO, was expected to co-sign the authorization documents alongside Reginald. 10 days before that meeting, Marcus came home and asked Celeste for a divorce. He was gentle about it, in the way people are when they've rehearsed. He said the marriage hadn't been working for a long time. He said they'd grown apart. He said he cared about her but couldn't keep going like this. He did not mention Diane Whitmore. Celeste didn't say the name either. She asked him, "Have you thought this through?" He said he had. She asked him, "All of it?" He said yes, he was sure. She nodded. She went to her office and called Patricia. The divorce papers were prepared. Celeste reviewed them. She signed where she was supposed to sign and returned them. She didn't contest anything. She didn't make demands beyond what she was legally entitled to, which wasn't much. They'd had a prenuptial agreement, one that Marcus's family attorney had drawn up, and which Celeste had signed without objection, because she had always known she didn't need anything from the Hargroves. Marcus signed his copies the following Friday. Diane was with him at the attorney's office. Celeste knew because the receptionist, who had processed Celeste's documents earlier in the week, mentioned it without realizing she was disclosing anything significant. The Monday before the board meeting, Reginald called Marcus into his office to review the ClearPath documents one final time before the vote. Marcus sat across from his father and went through the package, the acquisition terms, the leaseback structure, the capital allocation, the ownership disclosure. He turned to the page that listed ClearPath Health Properties' principal ownership. He read the name, he read it again. Reginald, watching him, said, "Something wrong?" Marcus put the page down. "Who is ClearPath?" Reginald said it was the acquiring entity. He'd explained this. Healthcare real estate company. Strong balance sheet, good terms, the attorneys had signed off. Dad. Marcus's voice had gone flat. Who owns it? Reginald looked at the page. Clearpath Properties LLC. Principal owner Celeste Hargrove. He stopped. The room was quiet for a moment. Reginald looked at his son. Yes, Marcus said. Reginald picked up the phone and called his lead attorney, who called his corporate team, who pulled every document in the Clearpath file and spent the next 4 hours confirming what was already obvious. The woman who had quietly signed divorce papers 6 days ago owned the company that was about to acquire 3 of their most valuable properties. The board meeting happened on schedule. It had to. The deal had been properly negotiated. The terms were fair. The attorneys found no grounds to withdraw without triggering a breach. Clearpath's legal team, led by Patricia, arrived prepared for exactly this situation. Celeste did not attend. She had never planned to. She sat in her office in Midtown and took calls and reviewed acquisition documents for a property in Charlotte and let Patricia handle the room. The board voted to proceed. There was no legal reason not to. The deal was good, the capital was needed, the terms were unchanged. What changed was everything else. Reginald had spent 40 years building something he believed would pass to his son. What he understood in that boardroom was that his son had signed divorce papers, had walked out of a marriage, with his mother's encouragement and Diane Whitmore standing beside him, without knowing that the woman he was leaving had more financial leverage over his family's company than he did. The sale-leaseback meant Clearpath now held the real estate underlying 3 facilities. They were good tenants and had no obligation to do anything but honor the lease terms. But the dynamic had shifted in a way that couldn't be undone by any signature. Vivian called Celeste the evening after the board meeting. Celeste let it go to voicemail. She didn't listen to it until the next morning. Vivian's voice was different from the sitting room voice, less refined, more like someone who had just learned that the floor they'd been standing on was owned by someone else. Celeste deleted the voicemail and made coffee. Marcus called twice that week. Celeste answered the second time. He asked if she had known, when she'd agreed to the deal, when she'd let him sign the papers, when she'd sat through all of it, if she had known what was going to happen. She thought about the earring she'd found on the nightstand. She thought about Vivian's word, graceful. She thought about a sitting room in Buckhead and the specific way a person could be told they didn't belong while sitting in a chair they'd never asked to be in. She said, Marcus, I've been working on this acquisition for 8 months. We signed the divorce papers 6 days ago. You had every opportunity to ask me what I did for a living. You knew I worked in healthcare. You knew I traveled. You never asked more than that. He was quiet. She said, I didn't do anything to you. You made your decisions. The deal was fair. The terms are still good. Your company got what it needed. She paused. So did I. She ended the call and went back to work. Diane Whitmore and Marcus were photographed together at a charity event in Atlanta 3 weeks later. Celeste saw the photo the way anyone sees a photo now. Scrolling past it, recognizing the faces moving on, she felt less than she'd expected. Maybe nothing at all. What she felt more clearly was something she'd almost forgotten she was allowed to feel, the particular quiet of a life that belongs entirely to you. No dinner table she hadn't chosen, no sitting room she'd been summoned to, no one deciding whether she fit. Clearpath continued operating. The Hargrove facilities continued running. The leaseback terms were honored to the letter. Patricia sent a note after the first quarter's payments cleared. Clean, professional, no issues. Reginald retired from the board the following spring. The announcement was polite. The timing was not coincidental. Marcus, without his father's name anchoring him to the COO role, found the transition harder than he had anticipated. The instinct that hadn't been there before didn't arrive. The board brought in an outside firm to assess operations. It was a process that would take time. Celeste was in Nashville when she heard about it. Another site visit, the 3rd this year, for a new development going up near Vanderbilt. She was standing outside the construction fence with a hard hat in her hand, looking at the framing of what would become a 6-story specialty care facility, when her assistant mentioned it. She listened, nodded, and looked back at the building. She had put on that first hard hat when she was 27 years old, standing outside a 2-story medical office building in Durham that smelled like fresh drywall and possibility. She hadn't known then that it would become this. She'd just known she could see what other people weren't seeing yet. She still could. Some things she had built had not lasted. The marriage, whatever it had been, was one of them. She didn't blame Marcus entirely, or if she did, she'd stopped letting that blame occupy space she needed for other things. He had made choices. So had she, including the choice to leave quietly, to let the board meeting happen the way it happened, to sign the papers without a fight, to trust that a position, properly understood, was enough. She hadn't needed to say a word in that boardroom. she hadn't needed to say a word to Vivian. The work had said it. The building going up in Nashville would take 14 months to complete. Celeste would visit 4 more times before the ribbon cutting. She would stand in the finished lobby on opening day and shake hands with the medical director and look up at the high ceilings she'd specified and the light coming through the windows she'd approved and think about the fact that the only person who had ever needed to know her worth was herself. She'd known it for a long time. She had simply, quietly, been waiting for everyone else to figure it out.